The sunlight filtering through the window fell across Harold's wrinkled cheeks, and the silence inside the house was almost palpable. In the small living room filled with books, he sat on a worn-out armchair, staring at the wall. His eyes were open, but his mind was far away. The silence inside him was louder than the birds outside. Harold was 78 years old. He had been living alone for 12 years. Since his wife Margaret passed away, his life had resembled the dusty frames of old movies. No laughter, no arguments, no unexpected doorbells. Only routines, only repetitions. Once Harold and Margaret had been a couple of bird watchers. They'd lose themselves in nature, track rare species, write each other letters with bird names, and spend hours waiting at the telescope. To them, birds were not just creatures. They were symbols of freedom and connection. But now, Harold had become a man who no longer even looked up at the sky. That morning, it started just like any other. He had made his tea and began flipping through the old newspapers when he heard a sound, a strange chirp, something coming from high up, just beneath the roof. He furrowed his brows. Slowly, he got up, grabbed his cane, and stepped onto the wooden stairs inside the house. The stairs leading to the long-unused attic creaked slightly. With each step, an old memory surfaced in his mind. He remembered the first time he had observed migratory birds on a nature trip with Margaret. It was decades ago. Back then, the woman's eyes weren't on the birds, but on him. Even if they can fly, some of them return to the same nest, Margaret had said. That's why I love birds. They're loyal. Harold opened the door. There was a dim light in the dusty attic, and there by the window something was moving. A pigeon, but not an ordinary pigeon. One of its wings was hanging slightly and its breathing was irregular. It had a thin leather strap around its leg, and squeezed into the strap, a crumpled piece of paper. Harold knelt down. He carefully approached the bird to avoid hurting it. With his fingers, he loosened the strap. The paper almost seemed like it would fall apart between his fingers. It was damp, pale, and torn. Only these words were legible. "Find me, please. You're my only hope." Harold collapsed to the ground. He took the bird into his hands. Its feathers were soft. Its heart was beating fast. This wasn't just a bird. It felt like a call from the sky. No one had said please to him in years. For a moment, he felt like someone was alive again. "Find me, please. You're my only hope." These words, they were words that penetrated deep, stirring something in his heart. In that moment, Harold felt that this wasn't just a call for help, but also an echo from his past. He carefully placed the pigeon into an old box. He put cotton inside, left a bowl of water, and a few grains of wheat beside it. Then he went straight to the cabinet where his old belongings were stored. His hands trembled as he opened the drawer he hadn't touched in years. Dusty boxes, yellowed envelopes, a broken wristwatch, and those letters from Margaret. He had kept them all these years. He pulled a letter from the box. He slowly unfolded the paper. Margaret's handwriting, soft but distinct. There was a slight slant between the letters, and some words had a delicate emphasis. He read it. Suddenly, his eyes filled with tears. It wasn't the words in the letter, but the sound of the writing. It was familiar to him. "Close your eyes, Harold, and listen to what the wind is telling you. Sometimes a bird, sometimes a leaf, sometimes the sky opens paths for us." He took out the second letter from the same envelope. This one was also from Margaret. Again, that handwriting. The same slant, the same emphasis. Harold took a deep breath, and then he turned to the crumpled piece of paper he had found in the attic, tied to the pigeon's leg. "Find me, please. You're my only hope." A voice inside him whispered. This writing, so familiar, so personal. But years had passed, and Margaret was no longer here. Wasn't she? Harold closed his eyes. He imagined the desk where he and Margaret used to write letters together. While he wrote the names on the envelope with the pen, Margaret would watch the birds from the window. Back then, writing wasn't just words to them, it was a connection. It was the soul poured onto paper. Harold placed the old letter and the new note side by side. Two worn-out pieces of the past. But there were similarities in the lines. The trembling in some letters, the slant at the end of some sentences. And most of all, the letter L in the word please. Margaret always wrote that letter in uppercase. Was this a coincidence, or was Harold losing his mind? That night, sleep didn't come to his eyes. Every second he thought about that message. You're my only hope. The sentence kept echoing in his ears. Once, Margaret had said the same sentence to him. After a huge argument, years ago, the next morning Harold made a decision. Whoever sent this message, he would find them. Whether a ghost from the past or a real person, this message hadn't fallen from the sky. Someone had written it, and Harold had to recognize that hand. For the first time in years, Harold moved quickly. It was as if his heart had begun to play a long, silent melody once again. He carefully placed the pigeon in a small cage. The bird's wound was starting to heal, but it was still weak. He didn't want to leave it at home. This bird was no longer just an animal. It was a connection. He placed the cage beside the chair, tucked the note into the inside pocket of his coat. Then he grasped his cane, put on the old jacket that had been gathering dust for so long, and stepped outside. His first stop, the city library, the old building where he and Margaret had attended writing classes, the place that hosted birdwatching club meetings. When he walked through the door, the smell of paper and old books stirred his memory. He quietly walked up to the reception desk. "Hello," he said. "You don't know me? Harold Turner?" The woman at the desk smiled. "I actually do know you. Your wife, Margaret, used to come here all the time." Harold's heart skipped a beat. How strange it was that even after all these years, some people were still remembered. "I'd like to look at the handwritten archives," he said. The woman nodded. "Some old notes sent by our members are still in the archive." Harold spent hours reviewing the writings, Margaret's letters, notes, notebooks. But nothing he found was enough to decode the mystery of the message. The words were similar, but was it the same person? He couldn't be sure. The next day, he went to the post office. "This pigeon, who could it have come from?" he asked. The clerk shook his head. "Pigeons aren't used much anymore, but some old clubs are still active. Still, tracking down the sender is difficult. No GPS, no sender information." Harold felt disappointed. Not being able to reach the person who wrote that message was like being trapped in uncertainty. One night he sat up in bed. He had an old letter from Margaret in his hand. It was one of the shortest letters she had ever written to him. "If I can't reach you one day, look at the sky. I must have left a trace there." These words carried the same feeling. If I can't reach you one day. Harold went to one of the pigeon clubs the next day. An elderly man carefully examined the bird. This bird's leg strap, custom made. Only one couple used this many years ago. "Who?" Harold asked eagerly. "I've forgotten the name, but the woman had very deep eyes. She and her husband used to come here for bird watching. She would name the birds, write special notes for each, and send them." Harold's heart began to pound. "Margaret Turner," he whispered. The man slowly nodded. "Yes, I think that was her." Harold's eyes filled with tears. After so many years, it felt as if Margaret's presence was before him once again. But he still wasn't sure. Had this message really come from Margaret? Or was someone else trying to keep her memory alive? And that night, the pigeon flew out of its cage and perched by the window. It had left something by the glass, another small piece of paper, pressed into an envelope. On the envelope, the following words were written. "Keep going, Harold. You're very close." After reading the message, all of Harold's dark thoughts suddenly turned into light. Looking back, the letters from Margaret, the birds, the writings, everything had meaning. But this new note, in a way, it was the final spark that filled the missing piece after all these years. Harold read the letter again without wiping his tears. "Keep going, Harold. You're very close. Keep going." For so long, he had felt that a voice deep inside his heart had only whispered these words to him. It had been years since he last heard Margaret's voice. But this voice, no one could change that. Harold took a deep breath and returned to the old library. He went through the letters again, the notes, the writings, and suddenly something came to his mind. Margaret had always told him, "Let it go." Sometimes a bird, sometimes a leaf, Sometimes a person, sometimes a mistake. Everything had its time, but had that time already passed? For a week, Harold did nothing but follow the trail. There was something everyone knew, something everyone said. Sometimes forgiving meant forgetting, but for Harold, forgiving meant embracing the past, owning his mistakes. And finally, one morning, he found another envelope. This time, it wasn't a response from the dark corners of the past, but a solution. Harold, for me, forgiving will also be for you. And perhaps walking this path will always lead you in the right direction. He slowly opened the envelope. After the first letter, everything made more sense. A handwriting following a fingerprint. But it wasn't Margaret's handwriting, it was someone else's. Inside, there were only a few lines. There was a reason for everything. Maybe I can't share it with you, but I need to remind you of what you know. Harold's heart raced. Who was this? Was this really one of Margaret's friends? Or was it someone else? Someone from the depths of the past? His emotions were becoming more complex. So many years of silence. Such a long gap. And still, one question remained. Who was this person? Harold noticed a small clue at the bottom of the letter. The place I once spoke to you. What did this sentence mean? Once, Harold closed his eyes. The place Margaret had visited most often. The city park. Days passed and Harold followed more and more clues to track this note. He searched everywhere, from the old bird-watching area in the park to the small bench where Margaret had written her notes. One morning, just as he was about to give up, he found an envelope at the base of a large plane tree at the corner of the park. He quickly opened the envelope. Forgive me, Harold. Look at the sky. I'm waiting for you. Harold closed his eyes, and there, years later, just like their first meetings, he felt Margaret once again in the deepest corner of his heart. There was a sense of relief inside him. All those lost years, everything that had been missing, seemed to fall into place. A bird's wings, a letter's voice, a woman's memory. They had all come together. And that morning, for the first time, Harold opened his eyes, took a deep breath, and let a smile linger on his lips. The peace that had once been lost was now complete. Harold knew there was a secret behind the last letter he had found in the park. This time, the meaning of the words had begun to overshadow all the old memories. Forgive me, Harold. Look at the sky. I'm waiting for you. What exactly was this sentence telling him? As he walked toward the bird-watching area, for a moment, he wondered if everything was just a dream. A bird, a letter, a park, and still not finding the truth. But the restlessness inside him propelled him forward. The memories of the past carried a clue to uncover this secret. As Harold descended deeper into the park, he quickened his pace. Now he truly wanted to know what had happened in this old corner. The voice inside him urged him to do this. The place where Margaret had often gone, her beloved bench, the place where everything had begun. His eyes locked onto the bench. He felt that something was there, and in that very moment, he found an old envelope at the corner of the bench, right beneath the great chestnut tree. He opened it carefully. Another letter emerged, but this time, it was different. The writing in the letter looked more like handwriting, but it wasn't similar to Margaret's. These were the words of someone Harold didn't recognize. He took a deep breath and began to read the letter. Dear Harold, I know you remember me. Maybe you've never forgotten, but there's something you don't remember. I am Margaret's long-lost sister. My name is Emma. These birds somehow brought you back to me. Margaret and I used to love writing and communicating with the birds, but things got complicated. When I went missing, she left you alone. Now, after all these years, I'm trying to reach out to you. Harold's heart stopped for a moment. Emma, Margaret's lost sister. All these years, no one had ever told him this truth. And now, behind a bird and a letter, the traces of a lost life were coming to light. Tears welled up in Harold's eyes, trying to carry the weight of this secret hidden in the depths of time. Margaret's missing sister, someone who had been away from the world for years. But now, somehow, she had returned to Harold's life. At the bottom of the envelope was an address. And when Harold found that address, he would finally understand who Emma really was. This woman, once lost, had now come back. But why had she stayed silent for all these years? Why hadn't she given Harold a sign? And what did it mean for Harold to unravel the secret that Margaret had kept hidden? That evening, as the sunset gathered, Harold put the letter in his pocket and took one last look at the sky. Now everything had meaning. A bird, an envelope, an address. These were not just shadows of the past, but also keys to discovering the future. As Harold entered Emma's home, the emotions in his heart became tangled. For years, he had shaped his understanding of Margaret's disappearance through misunderstandings and forgotten words. Emma, however, was determined to finally confess the secret she had kept inside for so long. Emma stepped toward Harold and began to speak slowly. "Harold, the truth behind Margaret's disappearance slipped right under our noses. Over time, everything became even harder. I remember that day. It still plays in my mind, clear as day." Harold listened more carefully now. Emma's voice trembled. One day, Margaret decided to go to the mountains alone, to follow the birds. She needed to make an observation, but that day, an avalanche hit. Margaret disappeared. Our search for her, the wrong decisions we made, not telling you, not letting you know, everything became more complicated. Harold's face froze. So, was there anything behind Margaret's disappearance other than an accident? Was it just a mistake? Emma shook her head, trying to wipe away the tears that had started to fall from her eyes. "Yes, an accident, a disaster. But Harold, I never told you because I thought you wouldn't be able to handle it. I was scared. I thought you couldn't bear it. But now, I can't carry this anymore." Harold took a deep breath. The guilt he had carried for years suddenly began to make sense with Emma's explanation. The truth was so simple. Margaret had disappeared due to an accident, a disaster. Neither Emma nor Harold could have prevented it. After all, Margaret's disappearance was just bad luck and the cruelty of nature. But the truth, hidden for so many years, was finally accepted. Harold decided to let go of the anger inside him. Forgiving the past meant healing not only Emma's wounds, but also the broken parts of his own heart. "Emma, I forgive you, and I understand how hard everything has been." Emma lowered her head, wiping the tears from her eyes, and took a deep breath. "Thank you, Harold." Harold had released the anger and guilt he had carried for years. True forgiveness was about accepting the wrongs and losses of the past. This was a journey of uncovering Emma's secret, as well as finding his own inner peace. Margaret's disappearance had been caused by an accident, not a wrong decision. In the end, Harold freed himself from his past burdens, becoming a stronger and more forgiving person in the face of life's challenges. All that remained was to look up at the sky and watch the birds, symbols of freedom and peace. Harold had finally made peace with Margaret's disappearance and the pain of the past. Final message. The truth is that life is complex in every way. Sometimes a person is lost, and other times the pains of the past remain. But forgiveness means letting go of the burdens of the past and making a new beginning. And sometimes forgiveness can be a person's greatest freedom. If you like this story, don't forget to share it with your friends and subscribe for more content.